talk about money. That grabs your attention, huh? More importantly, I want to talk about funding. I feel like we all have a general idea of what funding is, whether that be for research funding, funding for a project, funding for a nonprofit organization, anything really. Now let me introduce to you an analogy to kind of help us illustrate what this process looks like. So imagine you're a kid and your birthday is coming up. You're turning 12 or 13, which makes you a big kid, and so naturally you would want to have a big kid party. But we all know organizing a big kid party can't be that easy. And at 12 or 13, you probably don't have a lot of money. And so what do? You go ask mommy and daddy for some money. You walk up to them and you say, "Hey mom, hey dad, I want to have a big kid party. Can I have some money?" And then they would probably ask you questions in regards to this imaginary birthday party. Where do you want to have it? How many people do you want to invite? What kind of cake do you want? So on and so forth. And then depending on how well you've thought about your plan and how generous your parents are, they will either accept or reject your proposal. Now, this is a dramatically simplified example, but this is typically how funding application processes normally go. There would be a funder, so this could be a person or an organization or a company, and they would be interested in funding a type of initiative. They could have an area of interest. It could be in climate change or in mental health awareness or in education, anything. And then individuals and organizations who are interested will apply with a proposal of what they want to do with that money. There could be a few other selection processes that they go through, like an interview. And if they were accepted, then they were able to run their activities with that money. So then, what's the problem with funding? You get your birthday party money, and that's great. You could start putting your plan to action. But then, what if this starts to happen? What if your parents start controlling everything to do with your birthday party? They decide where it's going to be. They decide what kind of cake you're going to have. They decide who is allowed to be invited, who is not allowed to be invited. After a while, it doesn't really feel like your birthday party anymore, does it? Or what if they don't think that you can throw a good birthday party? They think they know what a good birthday party looks like, so they start imposing all of that onto you. Or what if you suddenly had to compete with your older siblings for that birthday party money? They probably have more experience throwing birthday parties, and they're probably better at convincing your parents more than you are. Sounds kind of unfair, doesn't it? The more and more obstacles that emerge, the more and more limited your access to this birthday party money becomes. So this is lack of accessibility and high intervention and lack of trust. These are real issues and barriers that emerge in the relationship between a funder and a beneficiary. And this is especially relevant for young people in less developed countries or the global south. I work for an organization called Oak Tree. We are a youth-led development NGO based right here in Australia. And one of our main programs is called the Oak Tree Youth Solidarity Fund. Through this program, we aim to break these barriers and make funding more accessible for young people. We do that by giving small, flexible grants to youth-led organizations in the Asia Pacific. I have had the privilege to work very closely with our partners from across the region. And here's one big thing that I've noticed. Young people have amazing ideas. They are the ones who see the issues in their community, and they are the ones leading the change, making the solutions to tackle those issues directly. It's just that, unfortunately, a lot of them don't have the capacity or the resources to access the money that they need to run these initiatives. Just from the application process, they're already facing one big barrier, the language barrier. Most young people in the region don't speak English as a first language, and yet they have to fill in applications forms, pages and pages long, and they have to sit through interviews, all entirely in English. Sometimes they don't even qualify to even apply for a grant or a fund in the first place. Most funders require organizations to be legally registered in their local government. This is something that takes a very long time. It takes a lot of bureaucracy. And it can even take money that these organizations already don't have. And so what happens is that they end up losing out to bigger, more established organizations that are run by older people, more professionals. And then there's a relationship with the funders themselves. Now, this is an interesting one because if you're putting your money somewhere, you're likely to have interest in how that money is spent. And that's completely fine. But the way that this manifests can sometimes be harmful. When we talk about mainstream funding, it's no longer just a conversation of money. It's a conversation of power. Like the birthday party example. Your parents are likely want to have a say in what happens in this birthday party. They wouldn't want you to do anything that strays too far from their values, and they can even set goals or boundaries that you need to meet within this birthday party. This is what we in the international development sector would normally call a top-down approach. It's where all the power up here, where the people who have the money, they get to have the biggest say to the people down at the bottom, the people who are receiving this money. Now, this is problematic in a few ways, but mainly because it keeps all the power gathered up at the top and not less a little bit at the bottom. It creates an almost distrust between the funder and the beneficiary. In terms of our parents, it's like as if they don't think we can run a good birthday party, even though it's our party, celebrating our birthday that we're throwing for our friends. Sounds kind of off, doesn't it? It's the same thing with these youth-led organizations. They are the ones who see the issues in their community. They're the ones who know their community best. So it makes sense for them to be the ones leading the change within their community. Instead of empowering these organizations, funders tend to end up constraining them and limiting their accountability. So not only does mainstream funding is limiting and is not accessible to young people, it also devalues local knowledge and local practices. So then, what's the alternative? How do we make funding more accessible for young people? The answer is in this thing called participatory funding. Participation is a topic that typically circulates around the community development area. It emphasizes the value of local knowledge and local practices, and also the value of collaboration. These are all applicable to funding. It is important to have beneficiaries at the forefront of the initiatives that they're leading, because again, they're the ones who know their community best. Participatory funding is run on an act of mutual trust between the funder and the beneficiary. This means including more collaborative processes with every stage of the project implementation, from the design to the execution, all the way up to reporting and evaluation. Participatory funding gives flexibility and the freedom for beneficiaries to create the programs and lead the change that they want to lead, that it fits their local context. This is where we turn that top-down into a bottom-up. By giving them that freedom, we are essentially evening out the power relations between the top and the bottom. It's about meeting organizations where they're at, instead of expecting them to meet us where we're at. It's about building in processes and systems that are more inclusive and are more flexible. And this can include little things. It can include including an interpreter, or a translator for meetings or interviews, or more flexible selection criteria during application processes. Or we can have organizations the opportunity to submit a proposal or report in their local language. These are little things, but they make such a big difference in making funding more accessible for young people. And so then the question becomes, what's the point? Why should we go through all this trouble in making accessible funding? Is it worth it? And I say absolutely. Because through breaking these barriers, we are now able to empower young people who don't have the resources, who don't have the capacity, but have amazing ideas. In my experience working with our partners from across the region, I have seen firsthand the amazing impact that they all had in their communities. For example, our partners in Timor-Leste, they did a series of climate awareness workshops across rural schools in Timor, doing reforestation activities. Our partners in Indonesia, they did a waste management bank and an entrepreneurship program with the community, all entirely student-led. Our partners in Tonga, they ran workshops for women and girls in rural Tonga on cyber safety and digital literacy. These are all amazing initiatives led, piloted, and executed by young people for young people in their communities. And it wasn't that we were giving them a huge stack of monies either. Our grants were only $5,000 to $15,000 US. We were giving them the freedom to do what they need to do with their local context. We weren't overly controlling them. We were letting them have that flexibility. We were trusting that young people have the ideas for change. It's just a matter of who takes a chance on them. And through funding mechanisms and more flexible, inclusive funding, this is where we have that opportunity to take that chance on them. So the next time you're looking to put your money into a nonprofit or a philanthropy or some sort of program, think about where that money is going. Think about the initiatives that you're supporting. Are they locally led? Are they locally based? Think about who's benefiting from that money. Is it the people who are directly affected by the issue on the ground? And if you're on the funder side of the perspective, if you are the ones administering these grants, you are the ones funding these projects, think about your systems and your processes. How inclusive are you with your beneficiaries? How flexible are you with how they implement their project? How open are you to how they do things locally, where they are from? These are all things to consider. And finally, and this one's for all of us, think about investing in young people. They are our future leaders and our future change makers. They are the ones who will have the capacity to make change and make an impact. And when we keep that in mind, we might actually make the world a much better place in the future. Thank you.